Was a girl running in our group. She had a high-speed motor in a 40 Ford Coupe. She had a racing cam and a supercharged. Look out, buddy, hot rod and large. She's a hot rod. She's a hot rod.
I got to tell you, we're having more fun than a barrel of monkeys here today already. 928 Car Guys is our hotline if you want to weigh in. I've got a little story here about my buddy. Just when you thought Carlos the Edsel, Carlos Goshen, but Carlos the Edsel, the ousted director of Nissan and Peugeot and who else? He had a bunch of Mitsubishi, somebody. Renault. That's not, yeah. It just wasn't. Carlos. That's all I can say. Carlos the Edsel indicted former Nissan chairman Carlos Goshen, Carlos the Edsel, says he is stepping up the campaign to reclaim his legacy. He calls Nissan boring and said its alliance with Renault is a zombie. In other words, the guy's big-time action man. He's Mr. Action, Kind of like a foreign Elon Musk. And I think Elon Musk kind of foreign, too. In a wide-ranging video interview from Lebanon last week, the ousted Nissan Motor Company chairman said he is stepping up the campaign to reclaim his legacy as one of the industry's most famous executives. Carlos, that's infamous executives. Goshen, who dished plenty of trash talk about Nissan, branding it a boring company and no one cares about, and calling its 22-year alliance with French automaker Renault a zombie that will soon keel over. He's not very happy, is he? His counterattack includes the publication last month of a tell-all book on the saga, Broken Alliances. Oh, good. Goshen says he already is planning a second book that will dive even deeper in the conspiracy he says took him down as head of the Franco-Japanese alliance. Goshen is busy working on documentaries, teaching university seminars, doing interviews, and planning legal strategy with a team that spans the globe. He's got money. The guy's got dough. There's no two ways about it. The fallen auto icon even says he keeps a toe in the industry and is regularly approached by startups for consulting help. I'm still in the game, Goshen said in an October 13th sit-down from the study of his Beirut residence. Goshen said he won't be a major auto player, attributing that partly to his age, 67. So he's not going to go after him whole hog, but Carlos the Edsel is back. The infamous, he wants to be famous. He's already infamous. Guy sneaks out of Japan in a box.
Yeah,
with
sure.
Mark stereo equipment, Eric.
I remember, man, that story was just amazing. And how he just kept on traveling towards Europe a little bit, you know?
How desperate you got to be.
Exactly.
To live in a box for a week or whatever it took to get to Lebanon.
Exactly.
And then it was Brazil or so. I thought it was Brazil.
Yeah, there you go.
First.
He actually went down to Brazil.
Yeah, he was down in Brazil first. That guy.
There you go.
He's a master of intrigue, my man.
Hey, like I say, he's already famous.
Oh, yeah.
In our eyes, he's famous in different ways.
Oh, yeah. We've got to talk about one. I told you we're going to start talking about maintenance for winter, and it's time. It's time to get this discussion ongoing. Every week we're going to pick a different subject. This week is going to be antifreeze. And we don't call it antifreeze anymore, or antifreeze. We call it coolant. And the reason for that is there's all new brands. I mean, there's a million brands out there. All the new cars have their own brand or their one brand specific. You have to use the right antifreeze with them. Their engines are made that way. If you don't use that antifreeze or coolant, I'll call it antifreeze until I die. Anyway, it's got to be car specific or you will lose your warranty. You'll lose your warranty. And you'll know if you go to the parts store, a real parts store, a good one, bumper to bumper. Go to a bumper to bumper auto value store. The auto value stores are probably the best there is. The bumper to bumper is part of auto value. And they have a bunch of old time guys that just know their business. The shelves are stocked with all the colors of the rainbow of antifreeze. You can get yellow. You can get orange. You can get pink, you can get red, you can get green. They're all different colors, and some are purple, and they're made for that car, just for that car. I think it's the Honda that takes yellow, and there's a Toyota that takes orange or pink, one of the two. It's all different. And if you're going to do this at home, if you're going to flush your cooling system or add to it, if it's low, if you open the hood, look at the bucket. There's a plastic bucket for your antifreeze. Do never touch the radiator again. That's not the way to do it. Everything goes into that plastic bucket, and there's a plastic cap on it, and that is your antifreeze. That's where it's saved. That's where it stays. That's the reservoir for your antifreeze. You look at it when it's cold in the morning, and there should be a line on that reservoir that says full cold. If it's not, top it off. But make sure you top it off with the right color. Okay, do you ever have your kids color Easter eggs and they dip them in like 3 different colors and it comes out going bleh? Well, that's what you're going to have in your cooling system, Eric. You're going to have bleh. That's not going to work.
Now, what happens if you do end up putting a different color of coolant into your car?
Well, then either you need to flush it, okay, depending on how much. If you put a little in there, you're not going to hurt it.
Right.
But if you put like a half a gallon or a gallon in there, now you got to flush it. Now it's got to be done. Now, if you're going to do that, there's a specific way to do that, and there's a right and a wrong way to do that. Mm-hmm. And flushing it is a stink pot. Flush and fill, we call it. If you still do that at home, I know a lot of guys like to do their own work. It's kind of hard these days. First of all, the little valve to drain the radiator is virtually impossible to get at unless you have a hoist and the car is up in the air and you can take down these shields, and there it is. But it's a royal pain. But again, if these diehard do-it-yourselfers, I don't mind that. I even help them. I mean, I loan tools out to people all the time. I try and make it so that everybody has a chance of doing their own car. I don't mind you doing your own car. But just knowing how much antifreeze you need is not enough. And the drain plugs, like I said, are miserable to get to. Miserable. And the fill procedures are vehicle specific. I mean very, very vehicle specific. They have to be. If you don't fill them, some of them take a gravity fill, some of them take a slope fill. So it's unbelievable how the differences in the cars. But if you don't fill them that way, some of them have little vents you got to open when you fill them. You'll get an air pocket. Your car will overheat. And these aluminum engines, you'll pop a head gasket or warp a head in a second. Mm. And you don't have to have a lot of miles on it to get it to overheat and do that. You know what I'm saying? The other thing is, if you can change the thermostat, if it's right on top, go ahead and change it while you're doing this flush. And you take the radiator hose or the garden hose and stick it in the radiator if you want, and wait till it comes up out through the thermostat housing hole, the hole that you made when you took the top off. You'll get a good flush out of it. Then you flush the heater core. Always flush the heater core. Disconnect the hoses and flush it. I'm talking to the do-it-yourselfers now. I'm not talking to the guys that need it done. If you got to have it done, you need to take it to a shop like mine or any shop that's certified with a good certified mechanic, ASE certified. We have all of them, and you got to have it. You got to have it flushed correctly, or there's no reason to do it. I mean, I've seen guys come in and say, "Oh, I change my antifreeze every 3 years," and you don't have to do that anymore. By the way, by the by, your antifreeze is good for up to 10 years. These new antifreezes, and you understand why when you go to buy a gallon of it. Because when did antifreeze become $60 a gallon or $50 a gallon? Because it's good for 10 years. If they can't get you every 3 or 4 years, they're going to get you every 10 years. They're going to double the price or triple it. So that's just how they do. But you still have to have the right antifreeze for your vehicle for sure. And you have to fill it correctly so that you don't get an air pocket and then overheat your motor and ruin it. Because you will ruin it. And air pockets are so easy to do. And I was starting to tell you, I have a guy that always said, I flush my antifreeze every 3 years, blah, blah, blah. Never flushed the heater core. Want to know why he didn't have any heat? You couldn't get anything through that heater core. It was crud. You got to flush the heater core too. My guys do that. Any reputable shop will do it that way. They'll do it right for you. So to flush it, You know what? If you think there's a problem with your antifreeze, I got to tell you, I'm still old school. I go by the smell. I take them out. I take some out and I put it in a cup and I smell it. I know if it's starting to turn to acid, it's time to flush it. If it's not, we'll put it back together and we'll make sure it's nice for you and you're good to go. You have time because that antifreeze lasts a lot longer than it used to. And it does. It's good stuff and it lasts a lot longer than it used to. And it's much more reliable, but it's also much more expensive, very expensive. And you got to fill it the right way. And sometimes you got to go out and buy special tools to fill it. The gravity slope bleed and all this other stuff. It's not pretty. So I'm going to tell you, like, you don't want to do this, but if you do, you do. While you're at it, you want to check your belts, make sure you change that thermostat. There's nothing wrong with that. And you got to check hoses for tightness because here's the deal. We start getting real cold weather, guess what's the first thing that goes loose? Hose clamps. And now you start the car up, it starts to build up a little pressure before there's any temperature under the hood, and we got an antifreeze leak. And it's coming out of a hose clamp, out of a hose that's supposedly tight. So just go over and tighten all your hoses, make sure they're good and tight. I mean, you don't have to take them off and check them, just make sure that the clamp on it is good, tight, and it's clean, everything is clean there. That way that when it gets freezing cold out, it's not going to shrink and leak on you. Okay, that's for sure. The other thing with the thermostat, when you change it, there's a trick. If you give me a call at my shop, 895-9520, give me a call one day and I'll tell you a little trick with the thermostat, how to fill it after that, and it works out pretty nice. That's a trick. It involves a toothpick.
Really?
Yeah, Eric. I keep toothpicks on my desk. Everybody says, what's that for? I don't pick my teeth. There's a reason for it. Anyway, my guys come up and get a toothpick all the time. Anyhow, this is the way we're going to have to do this for the winter. Now, you want it checked. Get to your mechanic, get to your technician, have them test it for how cold it's good for. Okay? And test it for smell. A real mechanic will smell the antifreeze and know. My guys are all trained. I trained them how to smell bad antifreeze or the makings or the beginnings of bad antifreeze. And you want to deal with bad antifreeze before it gets bad, Eric, because you know what? Everything starts to leak. Heater cores, water pumps. It all starts to leak when you have bad antifreeze. Not good. So you want to make sure that everything is up to snuff and clean and nice. Flushing that antifreeze is not a big deal. 150 bucks, I think, by me, or maybe a little more depending on the cost of the antifreeze. I mean, it's crazy, but hey, it is what it is. You have to do it right. And to do it right takes a professional. You can try and do it at home. If you got questions, just call me. Call me at my shop. I'll talk you down. I like a pilot up in the atmosphere. I'll get you down and land. You be no problem. Give me a call. There's a glimmer of hope in my world, and I like to say there's a glimmer of hope in my world. Now that GM has announced the chip crisis has just got me, I just can't see how people can pay this money for cars that when they have to buy a car. And every time I have to condemn one, if I get one on my hoist and it's got holes in the frame or something like that, I put it down and outside it goes and I tell them you can't drive this. It's just the way it is. But they kept them so long now because they didn't get a chance to replace them because we have this problem where the prices are somewhere through a roof or through Notre Dame Cathedral. They're up that high. It's just crazy where the prices are. But nearly all of General Motors' U.S. assembly plants will be running next week as the automaker said production would restart at its two Lansing, Michigan factories. Lansing Grand River Assembly will resume production Monday ahead of schedule. Cadillac CT4 and CT5 production at the plant has been idle since May 10th. Yes. And the Chevrolet Camaro production has been down since September 13th because of the global microchip shortage. The U.S. plant restart announcements came a day before GM reports third quarter sales. The Cox Automotive forecast said that GM sales volume will plummet 29% vehicles in that quarter, falling to more than 100,000 vehicles behind Toyota. Earlier this month, GM CFO Paul Jacobson warned that the automaker could lose about 200,000 vehicles in the second half of the year because of the ongoing chip shortage, most of which will be lost in the third quarter. So they're looking forward to the fourth quarter, which is now. And their chips are starting to trickle in. I think it's just a glimmer of hope. That's all it is. It's a glimmer of hope, but I think we've got one. I think we're going someplace. I think we've got an idea. We got a handle on this, and that's the way it's got to be. A little story here about electronic vehicles. We got to talk about those. You know we do. Every week. It's the same thing. I got a great closing segment for you, too. I got to tell you, there's some things going on. Anyway, you'll find out how mad I am. The U.S. will keep up with the increased demand for electricity over the next 3 decades by delivering those electrons to EV chargers in homes, businesses, and public spaces in a significant logistical hurdle. The headline was the disconnect in our electric grid. Pumps are everywhere, but electric plugs? Not so much, and not yet. As automakers jostle, easy for me to say, as automakers scramble to impress Wall Street investors with their latest electrification plans, dealers have to ask, is a grid that already strains in some areas to keep up with air conditioners and bad weather suddenly going to be able to reliably juice up millions of new vehicles? John Luciano, a Volkswagen and Toyota dealer in Amarillo, Texas, said, I know the guys in California and some of the others that are really selling a ton of electric vehicles are starting to get concerned. Are we going to be able to keep up? Well, over time, utilities will be able to support the increase in demand that electric vehicles will put on the grid. You think? We hope. But the key words there were over time, explains David Reuter, an auto industry veteran who now is the Chief Communications Officer for Next Era Energy, the nation's largest utility company and parent of Florida Power and Light. Yeah, that was a power company that was a master, was Enron, as I recall. While Reuters says the utility companies have ample power and infrastructure to service electric vehicles at current growth rates, he notes that it took many decades to build out the current U.S. gasoline and diesel fueling infrastructure. And yes, it did. It took forever to get all the gas stations up to, there was one gas station per town. Where could you go to get your gas? You had to go to the one. That was it. But that was the turn of the century, and that was the beginning of the current era of automobiles. Now we're in the electric vehicle era. And this is what I tell kids when I talk to them about going to trade school and so forth, and when I talk to groups. I tell them, there's never been a more exciting time to get in on the ground floor of the automobile business. Back in the day, if you went to work for Henry Ford as an engineer, you were revered because you were part of a revolution. A great revolution, a transportation revolution. Well, now we have another transportation revolution on our hands. Education is the key. I'm going to get Simon Leon. I know I told you that. Well, I got an email from him last week. He is okayed that we're going to get together in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to talk about education for students that don't go to college. We need you. We need you in the trades. And there's a lot of money to be made. Big money. You can make almost as much money or more than your colleagues that went to college for 4 years. You can do that in a year and a half.